Okay, so some guys in the LTI Discord have asked me what was my level like at 1 year of study. So the current question here is: it would be great to hear about what level you placed yourself at from the around a year of full study, the types of stuff you were working on, your weaknesses, maybe even some commentary on some stuff you wished you would have done around that time. Similar to what Matt and some other people have done, like Matt talks about struggles when he was at like a year into AJET. Well, I think Matt's thing is completely different because he was like 3 years into study. But what I'm gonna say is, all right. So the first like maybe like 3 or 4 months, I'll just go through what I did in my first year and why I think that you guys are so lucky to have like all this information now and like all these like especially like the refold method, the MIA method, and all this. Even just more people saying like even Ollie Richards just saying like read because I don't know what it was. There wasn't really a lot out there of like this kind of guidance or anything. So what I'm showing you here is when I started this spreadsheet. Um, it was literally after a year. So my year is, I think, the seventh is like the exact point that I started Anki, which was the first day that I started. So I just take it from there. So this, all of my current records are after that point anyway. So up to this point, and this was the first time that I got into this series of kids book was literally at this point. So I can show you the other stuff that I've done before this. So the main thing I started off was when I went through Talk to Me in Korean, and uh, I went through their 500 words book, and I made the 500 words deck, and then I went through Korean grammar in use beginner, and then I think I went through intermediate, and I was at the same time I was watching stuff, and then I think my girlfriend told me about no, I asked her about what was some good TV shows like when you were younger or something, and she said like High Kick. I was like okay, so I looked up High Kick, and I watched the first series and the second series with I think I watched I think I watched it with no subtitles first, and then I watched it with subtitles, but I can't remember specifically. To be honest, my comprehension probably was not that high because even after going through, so I went through, even going through the grammar books, there was plenty of words like I didn't understand, and there was so much I did understand. That was the thing. Like there was so much I understood, and so much I just didn't understand. And this is like, I think since I started reading these kids books is when that was when I started like shooting up in level because I'd started doing something like actually good for me, like repetitive enough and like really common vocabulary, but just regularly reading. So before this, um, up to this point, I went through the vocab books. Something told me just naturally is to just build your vocab. So I went through all the vocab books. I went through the 2000 words beginner and 2000 words intermediate, and this all took like something like 6 months or something. And then when did I start? So in around April or May. So I did all these books. I was watching Billy live streams for fun, just like put it on in the background while I was reading something or going through something. I was just like constantly going through things like Talk to Me in Korean or Korean grammar in use or the vocab books, and I was just trying to remember all the vocab in there. I spent a lot of time entering it all into Anki and stuff to make the Anki decks. But that was such a like a waste of time. And one thing I really wish I did was just make like a picture deck earlier. But the thing is, there was literally no advice. So I joined like Billy's Discord because he just made it like towards the end of 2019, 2018 or something. And then I met some other people in there, and then we now have our own Discord of like 5 or 6 of us that, and then we occasionally invite someone. But um, like even that, like everyone, like Let's Learn Korean, everything. They just like it's like they just had no idea how to like go from nothing to high. Like there was no like real advice other than just like or talk to Koreans and stuff like that. Like the advice was so basic, and like even Talk to Me in Korean's advice here. If you actually listen to like Hyunwoo speak like to other people about how he learned English, that this is where I got like I presume, and like watching people like Luca is like this is where I got the idea to just like oh you know what, just reading the language is gonna get me further. So um, this is when I started looking for reading content, and obviously you guys now have like so much recommendations and like what like even different genres. You just have so much content and so much there's so many like things downloaded and so many PDFs and EPUBs and everything just lying about that it just makes it so much easier, and people actually telling you to like, all right, you can just read from like the start basically, because you can obviously read Korean straight away, and then you can start with like we didn't really have any graded readers or anything. I didn't know about Yonsei until like Giga Chad told us about it like a bit afterwards. I think somebody mentioned it, but it was like, oh, this looks boring. I'm not going to read that. So I'm just going to keep like at the time I thought, oh, the sentences in the vocab books they're pretty good, so I'll just like memorize all the sentences or whatever. So, but I do think the sentences are good, but it just does not cover enough ground, and it's just like what 4,000 like 6,000 vocabulary. Like it's just not enough. It's just not enough. Like no matter how many words you know, it just never seems to be enough, because there will always be words that you don't know, because people, especially things like web novels and like fantasy stuff, which is the main stuff I'm like watching, and then even when you watch like the sitcoms and stuff, there are so many like cultural references in those that you just don't know. So sometimes you can't tell what they're saying because you just don't know what that thing is. So it just takes such a long time to gain all the knowledge and everything. And the thing is with Korean, it takes even longer than it would like a European language. Like with European language, you get half the references in, and you get half the history as well, because you already know that from school and blah blah blah. And like obviously there are some things that are different, but it's just not enough to be like, oh, it's just too difficult with like Korean, because it's just so distant, and there's so many like so much like rooted in Chinese and like Buddhism and just even like Korean history that we just don't know about in the West, and like all sorts of things like even when you watch like I literally had to, when I was watching sitcoms I was learning like even like Jim Jib Bang years, like things like that. Like I didn't know what it was. I'd never seen it before. I was just like, okay, that's what this is then. Okay, oh, you can do this there, and I like every day I was like learning something new just by watching a sitcom. Even if I didn't understand the language, I was like, oh, I don't know what that is. Unlike you would just like learn new food and stuff. But so at 1 year, um, before this, I started reading these Kurimuro Bonon Segi Saye. So I found these, and this was like, to be honest, if I'd have never found these, I don't think I would have even been at the level I'm at now. And even things like Ollie Richards' book here is like it's just, or using like Yonsei can just get you into reading so much better than like we basically had nothing. So I got into these, and then foolishly thinking like there were so many words that I didn't know in this, just so many words. Like even if you read that now, like if I read that now, I would be fine. I think maybe there's like one or two words that I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that word, or it's just like it's like a set phrase that means something, and I like maybe I haven't come across it for like forever, and obviously because it's been like a year and a half or more maybe. Like you know what, you just forget things. You forget things all the time. You forget like what you've seen 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and it's just about constantly seeing things over and over again. So after that, I read this. This was in July. This was in August. This was in September, and then this was when after this book, I actually dropped this book halfway through, and then I started. I found these, and I was like, yes, that's it, because these were on Ready Select as well. So as you can see, these have 722 highlights, 1,007, and you can see some of the words here. Uh, the thing is, I know these are like 경이로움 and 활보하고, 예. And then there's things like here, like 읍조리다, like I know that now, obviously, but at the time, like it's not that it's difficult; it's that you can still know like 6,000 words or whatever, and there are just so many. Like this at this point here with these 1,000 highlights is when I knew like 6,000 words, and this 두서없이, I had to actually look this up. You can see here, I wasn't sure what it was because it literally like rarely ever comes up. So there are things in things that won't come up ever again. But the fact is, I had 6,000 words here, and sometimes I could tell what was going on. Like sometimes I knew what was happening, but there was a lot of times where it was like I don't know what's happening. But what I was doing was reading. I was reading to read. Like I was just reading because I knew that was where I was going to come across the most words. I don't know. I don't know how I figured this out. I don't know if who told me or whatever. But I used to watch a fair few videos on YouTube about like polyglots and all this, like Ikenna and Luca and Ollie and all this, and I would listen to like what they're saying, because obviously they've got places. But now when I look at them, when I look at them now, I think sometimes, well, they haven't really learned, and even Luca's give up on Japanese, and even like Ollie's give up on Japanese, because it's just so much harder than a European language. So when you see a polyglot who knows only European languages, their advice can be a bit like less trustable for someone who's trying to learn Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, something that's more distant, because it's like a completely different process. Like, even though I understand that it's like effectively it's the same thing and you can use the same thing, but with European language you can just output so much earlier, and like you just know so much more words, and your level will be so much higher at 1 year. But with Korean, for me, even after a year, even with like 6,000 words, there was just so many words that I'd never even seen, and I was actually going through the dictionary by using the advanced search. Like, what I had done at first, so every time I come across a word, I made an Anki deck. What I would do is get the words. So if it had like a 2 star, if it was like 2 stars, so advanced and intermediate. So what I was doing after this, like at the same time, I think it was at the same time. So I would just spend like an hour a day or something going through something like this. So I would put it on like advanced, and I would literally just go through all of them and like, do I know this word? Do I know this word? Do I know this word? And then I would just do that for like an hour a day instead of reading. Whereas what I would tell people to do now is read, because reading is obviously it's going to get you there faster, and all the words are in context. And this is the thing. Sometimes you can work out a word due to the context as well, as you become more familiar with different contexts. So like probably like most of the words in this now I'll probably know, but it's such a completely different level. Now, coming off that was when I went into this, and even what you'll see is this is after a year now. So the first book I actually read, there was a lot of words here in this book. The first one, so I read Oliver Twist first out of this series, and then I went, oh, okay, I'm going to do them in one, two, three, four, five. So I did them in order, and then as you can see, as it goes through, so even like 400, 200, 300, RG, and it goes through, and then there's like all of a sudden there's like a drop. It starts dropping slowly, and then there's like a really big drop here, and it goes to like 80, and then it doesn't really go much above 100 after this. And then this was how many? This was less than 6 months, like, so 6 months after, so 1.5 years after. This is when I added reading in. I was literally just banging them out, and then there was obviously some that have more, like 162 here, but it just depends on the book. But these are obviously written for children, so they're not too bad. But then I read things like Wandugi, and then these had less. So if I'd have read this, so if I'd have read like Amund like a year in, I would probably have had like 1,000 highlights, or like at least like 500, 600 highlights, because there's just so many words that like don't come up. Like, obviously, I know these words now, moriche, like things like that. Yeah, I know that. Hyunmigung, I don't even know why I highlighted that, because I'm pretty sure I knew at the time. But sometimes when you don't see a word for ages, it just doesn't come up. Do you know what I mean? So 1 year. So for reading and stuff, you need to get in at the ground level. You need to be doing it early, and you need to be building it up early, because when you start getting into the habit, that's when you just start learning more words quicker, and then you start getting it down. Like, you could use webtoons or something. It doesn't really matter. But I didn't really know any webtoons. I didn't know where to watch them, where to read them, or anything like that. So I was like, and I had no interest in like webtoons really. I just wanted to build up my Korean level, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to read fantasy stuff. So most of the webtoons I read now are fantasy stuff anyway. And then there's still like a word at least like one word every chapter. Like, I'll come across, I'll be like, oh, okay. Especially, what did I read? Muhyob. Yeah, that, stay away from Muhyob. Like, it's not worth it. So, um, what were you doing with your time? What were you reading? What novels? Was it more heavily novels? No, see, that's what I'm explaining now. So it wasn't really heavily novels, and I can't remember how much I was reading these per day, but I don't know how much. I would literally, I had it up on the double spread, and I was just reading as much as I could really. I was just going through. I was literally just going through it. Like, there's no other way to explain it. But I would literally like sit there for an hour, going through it. Maybe it was like 2 hours. I don't know. It couldn't have been more than an hour, because I was spending more time going through the dictionary, the 1 star words. I spent quite a lot of time doing that. Maybe at least an hour a day doing that. and then I would be watching for like an hour, 2 hours of high kick, and then I watched like high kick one, high kick two, high kick three, and then I went back to like high kick one, high kick two, and then what did I do here? So it should say here. So this was when Kamjabyo. So this was the first time watching Kamjabyo, and I think it might have been the second time actually, but it was really spaced out, and I wasn't really reading that much because I would just started work here, so I didn't really have time to do it. So I had time to read, and then I would make food, and then um, I pretty much didn't really have much time after that. So I usually like watch one episode or two episodes or something. I just couldn't be bothered. I think I was playing Pokemon as well at the time, but I probably should have just put it on while I was playing Pokemon, but I didn't, yeah, because I wanted to pay attention to it. So for the most of it, there was like I don't think I understood that much. Like I could understand what was going on from the context of what's happening, but if I just put something on without listening, like I wouldn't understand like more than 50%, more than 60%, like easily. Like probably less than that. Like I was literally understanding like 20%. Even though I knew like loads of words and stuff, it was like I didn't really know like phrases and stuff like I was learning phrases from watching the TV show. I understood enough to get like shorter phrases, but when someone said like a long sentence, like I don't know, I just wouldn't understand what they're saying, or like I would just pick out a few words. Now I know that sounds depressing because that was like literally a year in, but that's just the way it is. I don't think you can change anything about that, and I actually think that from the start of like a European language, if I listen to like Italian or Spanish or something, I can pick out words from that, and then that's what like my level of Korean at 1 year was like starting on German or something, like just picking out words. Like you can pick out German words straight away. Like I don't know why, it's just very easy to do. The sound system is very like familiar and all that. So that's what it felt like. And I was listening to podcasts a lot. So when I went out, so that was before that. Yeah, that was before the year. So because it was before I got my job, so I had to go to the job center that was like a 20-minute walk away. So I would listen to a podcast there and back. So that was at least like 40 minutes uh, once a week. And then I would just go for a walk for like half an hour or something like that. So that was like another half an hour of listening to a podcast. Maybe it was an hour. I can't remember. So that was what I mainly did for listening. But a lot of the time, I literally would understand like just a few words. And the thing is that at that point, I didn't really care. So I was just listening because I presumed that listening would help my listening, like get better at listening, just get better at picking out words. Now, I don't know if that actually works. I don't know if it's helped me in any way, but I just did it because I wanted to get as much Korean into my ears as I possibly could. So instead of just walking in silence, I was walking and listening to Korean, but it wasn't like a great understanding or anything. Um, I don't really know if I have any advice for that. The only thing you can do, the advice I have is the more words you know, and the earlier you get reading, and the more sentences you see, the more words you know, the better your listening will become. Because picking out words, like 90%, 99% of picking out words is already knowing the fact that that word exists. So if you don't know a word exists, unless you're like a really high level and you can like a lot of people at 1 year won't be able to tell a lot of like the pronunciation, like ooh and like, stuff like that, and like oh and oh. Like people can't tell the difference like at a year unless unless someone deliberately tells you to do that. Like you just don't know the difference. Like what was in the question? Types of things I was my weaknesses. Yeah. So the types of stuff you were working on you were working on your weaknesses. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense, but my weaknesses were literally everything. My weaknesses were literally my listening, my vocabulary, my reading, everything, literally everything. I do have a recording of myself at 1 year, and I remember someone saying like one of the main things that I remember someone saying was like when you're reading it, you sound like you don't know the words, and I was like, yeah, you know what, you actually like are correct because when I read now, it's so much like more like it's like I understand what's going on. I can visualize it and everything, and it's like it just makes it the whole thing more succinct. Like it's so much easier to read because I know the words and I know what's going on. I know this is what it's like listening. It's like if you don't know the words, you can't really you don't know what's gonna come. You don't know what they're gonna say, and like I'm not saying you can predict what they're gonna say, but you don't know the words exist. Like the thing with listening is the word goes into your head, and you've got like zero point 0.5 seconds to understand that word, and if you don't understand it, it's already on like 5 words later anyway. So the only way to like get to that point is like you just know the words so well that when you hear them, you automatically understand what they're saying, even when it's like abstract things. So that at 1 year, you know what, just don't expect to be good. That's one thing. So is there anything else that I need to share? No, there's nothing else that I need to share. Okay, so that's about it really. To be honest, all I want to say is um follow the advice of the people. So the people in the Discord who have been like learning for like 3 years or whatever. I don't think there's many people, but like there is a few people in there who have been learning for like 3+ years. You know, when they tell you to read, when they tell you to do this and do that, like you should just do it because they've been through this situation. And the thing is, yeah, no one wants to tell you this, but at 1 year at learning Korean, it doesn't matter whether you're everyone who's in school. Like people are saying sometimes people say like, oh well, at least I'm better than traditional. Like, well, you know what? You're actually probably not better than traditional learners, and traditional learners definitely suck, and you definitely suck too. Because at 1 year, you just don't know enough. You just don't know enough of the language. You don't know enough about like Korean like sound system or anything. Like you just don't know enough. And no one wants to tell you this, but everyone sucks at 1 year of Korean. Every single person. If anyone is good at 1 year of Korean, they are either like Chinese, Japanese, or Vietnamese. Like seriously, because it's just so different. It's like so different. Like you're never gonna be good in a year. If anyone is good in a year, they are lying or people are like pretending to be dumb for them, like dumbing down their speech. I was talking to them slow, and they're just like convinced, like, oh, I'm having conversations. Like, yeah, nah, you suck. Like, even people who have been learning a long time, like they suck. They suck. Like a lot of these people on YouTube, yeah, they suck. They've got terrible grammar. Like they just sound good because you don't know what they're saying half the time anyway. So being realistic, I think that the average person, like you should expect like 4 or 5 years probably. Like I'm just gonna be serious. That's it. It's just about being serious. Like I'm not gonna lie to you, and people are gonna lie to you as well because people want to pretend like, oh yeah, I did it this quick, I did it like that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like you're gonna spend it like 4 or 5 years to be like okay, and then like after that you that's probably like when you probably like after like 4 or 5 years, that's when like if you start outputting, then you'll still suck at outputting. Like even if you waited, even if you did it before, even if you like been doing output and been doing like, a lot of input, you're still gonna like you'll suck. And the worst part is, yeah, is the better you get, the more you know you suck. That's the worst part. But the point is, being able to know you suck is probably the best situation because you can improve on that. Like when you suck, it means that you can improve. Whereas when you just like completely oblivious to like you don't know you suck, you just can't. How can you improve if you like you don't know you suck? Like if you don't know you're bad, like how do you improve? It's impossible. It's impossible to get better when you just have no idea. Like if no one ever tells you like you're rubbish. Like say you are like running in school and then you go to a different school and like three people are quicker than you or something, and it's like whoa. I didn't even know this was like the level like that. You thought you were the quickest person on earth. Do you know what I mean? Like you thought you were quick. You thought you had the best technique and all that. And then there's other people who are running like faster than you. Say well, one's shorter than you, one's taller than you. You start making things up like oh, it's because he's got longer legs or something. Like nah, no, you know what? You just suck. Like, and this is where if this is where it, like separates the best from the worst. So the worst people will be like, oh yeah, I do suck. Like I'll just give up. But the best people are like, yeah, I suck. So you tell me how to not suck, and I'll stop sucking. And then when you start seeing the improvement of that, like it's just like such a slow like it's such a slow burn of like constantly finding parts where you suck and then getting over them and just getting over. And it's honestly, it's mentally learning a language, especially like one of the most distant. In fact, this probably is the most distant language to English. Um, Possibly somebody will probably disprove me on that. I'm just saying, okay, one of. So it's literally unless you like grow. Even if you look at all like the Gilpos, yeah, like like a lot of them suck, man. Like they're seriously bad at. What's his name? So the guy who like What's Up Man, yeah. So he was in. a sitcom in the 90s, and he like 100% sounded American. And then if you watch his videos now, he sounds way better. And that's like 10 years, maybe like 20 years now of like learning Korean. And as someone who grew up with Korean like in his life, do you know what I mean? Like this is like the kind of level of commitment you need to like take like with this learning. Like it's just gonna take forever. Like you just have to you kind of just have to deal with that like from the start. And if you're not prepared to mentally deal with that, like if you want to get to the level like I'm conversational, like obviously you can do it quicker. He probably didn't spend as much time, but like if you want to get good, you got to put in the time, and the time is going to be a lot of time. So I would personally aim for like if you want to meet a goal of being like good, set it for like 10 years. Sorry if the mic keeps going too loud. Yeah, just like expect like mentally prepare yourself for like 10 years of Korean because if you're expecting like 2 3 years to be like good, you're just gonna like fool yourself. You're probably gonna give up. Or I would even say if you feel like you're not making progress and you still want to learn a language, choose something that's closer because in a year's time you will then have the knowledge that you can do. What you'll find is a lot of the people who seem to be getting better at Korean are people who have learned a language before because they don't give up, because they know they can do it. They know they can trust the process. They know they can do the process. They know they can learn the language like to a high degree because they've done it before. So that's probably the advantage of learning a European language first. But I do think if you go back, like if you learn Korean first and then go back, you're gonna laugh. You'll laugh at European languages. Like you just be laughing like, oh my god, I know half the words straight away. This is great. So I think I'm gonna end it there. Hopefully it's been quite long. Hopefully it's been informative. Thank you for watching.